All right, you guys, this morning we're going to delve into the mind of the master of horror, Stephen King. And this is the foreword from Night Shift, one of his earliest and best, I think, collections of short stories. My thought on this is maybe we can find out why some books are banned if we get inside the mind of a writer. Let's talk, you and I. Let's talk about fear. The house is empty as I write this. A cold February rain is falling outside. It's night. Sometimes when the wind blows the way it's blowing now, we lose the power. But for now it's on, and so let's talk very honestly about fear. Let's talk very rationally about moving to the rim of madness and perhaps over the edge. My name is Stephen King. Not my name, but his name. I'm a grown man with a wife and 3 children. I love them, and I believe that the feeling is reciprocated. My job is writing, and it's a job I like very much. The stories, Carrie, Salem's Lot, and The Shining, have been successful enough to allow me to write full-time, which is an agreeable thing to be able to do. At this point in my life, I seem to be reasonably healthy. In the last year, I've been able to reduce my cigarette habit from the unfiltered brand I had smoked since I was 18 to a low nicotine and tar brand, and I still hope to be able to quit completely. My family and I live in a pleasant house beside a relatively unpolluted lake in Maine. Last fall, I awoke one morning and saw a deer standing on the back lawn by the picnic table. We have a good life. Still, let's talk about fear. We won't raise our voices and we won't scream. We'll talk rationally, you and I. We'll talk about the way the good fabric of things sometimes has a way of unraveling with shocking suddenness. At night, when I go to bed, I still am at pains to be sure that my legs are under the blankets after the lights go out. I'm not a child anymore, but I don't like to sleep with one leg sticking out, because if a cool hand ever reached out from under the bed and grasped my ankle, I might scream. Yes, I might scream to wake the dead. That sort of thing doesn't happen, of course, and we all know that. In the stories that follow, you will encounter all manner of night creatures, vampires, demon lovers, a thing that lives in the closet, all sorts of other terrors. None of them are real. The thing under my bed waiting to grab my ankle isn't real. I know that, and I also know that if I'm careful to keep my foot under the covers, it will never be able to grab my ankle. Sometimes I speak before groups of people who are interested in writing or in literature, and before the question and answer period is over, someone always rises and asks this question: why do you choose to write about such gruesome subjects? I usually answer this with another question: why do you assume that I have a choice? Writing is a catch-as-catch-can sort of occupation. All of us seem to come equipped with filters on the floors of our minds, and all the filters have differing sizes and meshes. What catches in my filter may run right through yours. What catches in yours may pass through mine, no sweat. All of us seem to have a built-in obligation to sift through the sludge that gets caught in our respective mind filters, and what we find there usually develops into some sort of sideline. The accountant may also be a photographer. The astronomer may collect coins. The school teacher may do gravestone rubbings in charcoal. The sludge caught in the mind's filter, the stuff that refuses to go through, frequently becomes each person's private obsession. In civilized society, we have an unspoken agreement to call our obsessions hobbies. Sometimes the hobby can become a full-time job. The accountant may discover that he can make enough money to support his family taking pictures. The school teacher may become enough of an expert on grave rubbings to go on the lecture circuit. And there are some professions which begin as hobbies and remain hobbies even after the practitioner is able to earn his living by pursuing his hobby. But because hobby is such a bumpy, common-sounding little word, we also have an unspoken agreement that we will call our professional hobbies the arts. Painting, sculpture, composing, singing, acting, the playing of a musical instrument, writing. Enough books have been written on these 7 subjects alone to sink a fleet of luxury liners. And the only thing we seem to be able to agree upon about them is this: that those who practice these arts honestly would continue to practice them even if they were not paid for their efforts, even if their efforts were criticized or even reviled, even on pain of imprisonment or death. To me, that seems to be a pretty fair definition of obsessional behavior. It applies to the plain hobbies as well as the fancy ones we call the arts. Gun collectors sport bumper stickers reading, "You will take my gun only when you pry my cold dead fingers from it." And in the suburbs of Boston, housewives who discovered political activism during the busing furor often sported similar stickers reading, "You'll take me to prison before you take my children out of the neighborhood," on the back bumpers of their station wagons. Similarly, if coin collecting were outlawed tomorrow, the astronomer very likely wouldn't turn in his steel pennies and buffalo nickels. He'd wrap them carefully in plastic, sink them to the bottom of his toilet tank, and gloat over them at midnight. We seem to be wandering away from the subject of fear, but we really haven't wandered very far. The sludge that catches in the mesh of my drain is often the stuff of fear. My obsession is the macabre. I didn't write any of the stories which follow for money, although some of them were sold to magazines before they appeared here, and I never once returned a check uncashed. I may be obsessional, but I'm not crazy. Yet I repeat, I didn't write them for money. I wrote them because it occurred to me to write them. I have a marketable obsession. There are madmen and madwomen in padded cells the world over who are not so lucky. I am not a great artist, but I've always felt impelled to write. So each day I sift the sludge anew, going through the cast-off bits and pieces of observation, of memory, of speculation, trying to make something out of the stuff that didn't go through the filter and down the drain into the subconscious. Louis L'Amour, the Western writer, and I both stand at the edge of a small pond in Colorado, and we both might have an idea at exactly the same time. We might both feel the urge to sit down and try to work it out in words. His story might be about water rights in a dry season. My story would more likely be about some dreadful hulking thing rising out of the still waters to carry off sheep and horses and finally people. Louis L'Amour's obsession centers on the history of the American West. I tend more toward things that slither by starlight. He writes westerns, I write fearsomes. We're both a little bit nuts. The arts are obsessional, and obsession is dangerous. It's like a knife in the mind.
Oh, hi, honey. I didn't see you. I'll wrap it up. Okay.
In some cases, Dylan Thomas comes to mind, and Ross Lockridge and Hart Crane and Sylvia Plath. The knife can turn savagely upon the person wielding it. Art is a localized illness, usually benign. Creative people tend to live a long time, sometimes terribly malignant. You use the knife carefully because you know it doesn't care who it cuts. And if you're wise, you sift the sludge carefully because some of that stuff may not be dead.
Thank you, Dr. Becky Meadows. She was reading from The Night Shift Foreword by Stephen King. Yay!